How's it going? And welcome to episode 210 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, joined as always by Kevin Hastings. Thank you all for listening and watching. We've got a great show lined up for you as always as we head into our 420 edition of Faab going into, we're almost done with April. And we're only 5 Faab periods in, Kevin. Why does it feel as though we've been doing this for like a whole season already? But maybe that's just me. How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. I think the reason is because there's been so much going on, and it feels like that we really have to hammer out our fab each and every week already this season, which is always the case. But when we're forced to realize it is, I think that's a bigger thing. And yeah, hope everybody's having a great weekend, whether you're with us here on Friday on YouTube or Sunday morning prior to Fab going Sunday night. This is one of those weeks. Don't forget, many are celebrating a holiday this weekend. So
It's true.
those that are, happy Easter to you. And I just hope everybody's having a great weekend and enjoying some baseball.
You find those Easter eggs, right? In more ways than one.
Yes,
So yeah,
exactly.
there you go. Yeah, I know it's early and leagues are typically busier in April, right? Everybody's paying attention. No one's checked out yet. But I do feel as though I've done less leagues this year. Definitely less Fab leagues overall than I did last year. But
Me as well.
I feel as though as a percentage, they are all busier than my
Yes, I
Fab
agree.
leagues from last
It
year.
does feel that way for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very active group in each and every one of them. At least definitely double-digit winning bids every single week so far, closer to like 20 bids in a lot of them. So people are rolling the dice on a bunch of different players and making their changes. So you got to be on top of it. So let's get right into the news, Kevin, so that we can be on top of anything and everything we might need to. And we're going to start off this one with a whole bunch of promotions. We've got most of the news today, which is nice to
Wait, not
say.
all injuries?
It's not all injuries. No, exactly.
Nice.
There are, all right. So there are,
So we're adding players to our pool, not taking them away.
well,
This is a new concept.
yeah, right. For every player that comes up, a player does have to go down in some fashion.
True.
So each one of these does have a corresponding move, but does seem like a lot of new faces, at least, that we're going to be able to. Let's start in Milwaukee, where Caleb Durbin has been called up at the expense of Oliver Dunn, who got demoted. And manager Pat Murphy said that Caleb Durbin will be the team's everyday third baseman for the foreseeable future. Caleb Durbin, obviously not having any experience this season at all, somebody that a lot of us were, thinking about drafting, wondering what his role was going to be, how quickly he was going to come up. And here we are in still technically mid-April, and he's making his debut for his new team and already has a gig. All he has to do is not play himself out of it. What are your overall thoughts on what Durbin can do in his new role, and can he keep it all season?
I think he probably can. It's going to be up to him, obviously, but he's projected for low teen strikeout rates and near double-digit walk rates. That's what we've seen throughout the minors. Of course, those walk rates were in the double digits. Projections are going to regress those a little bit, but yeah, there is one player on this roster that has played third base in the past week. That was Vinny Capra versus a lefty. We may see that once in a while, but and unless they make another move, until then, Caleb Durbin is absolutely the third baseman versus righties, and we know he has that speed, little bit of power, not a lot to speak of, but it's not zero. And so, yeah, I expect Caleb Durbin to be a popular ad this weekend.
I mean, just hearing, it's like you expected this move, but just to hear Pat Murphy come out and say it, it's like say sometimes you just have to believe a manager when he says what he says, and it's nice to get confirmation bias from from an actual source. So I'm taking him at his word. I don't see, unless he proves us otherwise, that this is a platoon. I'm expecting to see him against both-handed batters again until he proves otherwise. So nice to if you're looking for that. I mean, Durbin already has in Yahoo. He's got 3 position eligibility in NFBC, just second base. So he'll gain that. What's nice is he'll gain the corner/middle
pretty
eligibility
quickly.
in
Yeah.
short order. Yeah. All right. Well, another call up here, maybe a little bit more exciting, maybe not. I know it was definitely exciting to a few in the Pitcher List Discord today. Minnesota with all of their injuries, so this does come at the expense of some injuries. We'll get those out of the way first. Matt Wallner hit the IL with a hamstring strain, and Willie Castro left Wednesday's game with oblique tightness. Did not see him actually go on the IL, but he did miss. He wasn't playing today, if I'm not mistaken, on Friday. In his place, a couple of other smaller moves here or there, but the name to really pay attention to here is Luke Keeschall being called up and making his MLB debut. Keeschall, a top 100 prospect in his own right on most lists that you might find out there out in the wild. Do you expect anything long term from Keeschall, or do you think this is just an opportunity due to complete circumstances of the Minnesota lineup completely being obliterated by injuries?
Yes, all of that.
Oh,
I think he really does have to perform to stick around. But what a debut,
right.
man. 2 for 3 with the stolen base, a double. And this offense needs a jolt. Minnesota has been horrendous. We've talked quite a bit about Atlanta and Houston, those offenses that we expected to be very, very good, if not juggernauts. Minnesota, I think many of us expected to be a good lineup this season, and they have not started out that way. So any little jolt they can get, it would be really hard, even if the original plan was this is a temporary move. If he hits the ground running as he has so far, it's going to be really for a team that struggled so much so far this season to send him back down.
Yeah, I mean, even with all the injuries, as I pull up roster resources lineup expectations here, you still got Keeschall on the bench in a short side of a platoon as the righty pair to probably Edward Julian, maybe. I mean, any of these guys. I mean, we know the Twins have had a history of platooning where possible, in conjunction with the Rays and San Francisco and what have you. So maybe that's not maybe that sticks, but maybe he if he continues doing what he did today, like you said, he can
Versus a
push
righty
himself into
starter.
that lineup more often. Another call up, but has not made his debut, was Tampa Bay called up speedster Chandler Simpson for today, but he did not start. I don't think he's been pinched run. He hasn't been brought into the game either yet, but that game I think is still going on, so there's still time. But this is, quote, the fastest man in baseball. I literally could be quoting anybody. Because it's very, very common knowledge of what Simpson has done in the minors up until this point on the base paths. Can he? I mean, we always say like there's players like this that can be valuable in our fantasy leagues because they can get you the category that you're looking for off the bench. So even if he doesn't start, you're throwing him in there just to get those stolen bases, maybe 1 or 2 per week. Do you? Again, I mean, Tampa Bay has some other speedsters on their team, and they can still be valuable. Is Simpson that fast and that good? Is he Billy Hamilton-esque that you can deal with the single category, or do you expect him to produce elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't think this will be Billy Hamilton-esque. It's not a single category. Now, there's not any power there. His Fangraphs prospect grade is 20 current, 20 future for power.
For power,
So That gets us down to 3 categories, but 70 hit tool, 80 speed. We know the speed is 80, right? I'm just gonna scroll down here because obviously I do have him as a speed option for this week. This is what's crazy to me. He has not debuted. You brought that up already, and he is 74% rostered in main events.
Right.
Main event players do not stash guys very often. That's surprising to me, that number being still at 74% at this point in the season. But here's why. Here's his stolen base numbers the last 3
Yeah, right.
seasons. 104, 104 stolen bases in only 110 games. 94, that took him 115 games, and 81, I think that was a 91 game season, if I'm remembering correctly. That's his last 3 seasons of stolen bases, but I also briefly mentioned that hit tool. So even at the bottom of the lineup, and with all these home games this coming week is a weird week for Tampa. They're on the road all week long, but or was that this week? One of the 2 weeks. We'll look at that soon. They have a lot of home games coming up,
Yes.
so that offense will be clicking. Even at the bottom of the order, guys should get at bats. The question is, what's Tampa going to do? We didn't see him in the lineup Friday. They were facing a lefty. We know Tampa. I think he gets most starts versus righties, and that will be enough for runs scored and hopefully a decent batting average. I believe that the projections have him for decent Yeah, they
Yeah.
range from 270 to 290
Yep.
projected batting averages. So this would be a 3 category guy. Not just a one-trick pony, as we like to say for guys like Billy Hamilton. I'm excited about this if he does indeed get the playing time. He's going to be expensive in the leagues where he is available with that much speed. So hopefully we get an indication on Saturday and Sunday prior to Faab run of what it appears that playing time is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, batting average obviously is what we care about in fantasy, but we also want him to be on base in general so he can continue to steal base.
400 throughout the minors. Yeah.
Yeah, and so his double-digit walk rate through the majority of his time in the minors, a very good sign. And his projections for a 320 plus or 330 plus on base percentage, also going to be a good sign. And it doesn't hurt, that his teammate Caballero is somebody who I have in a lot of places, just because this is a guy who obviously Tampa Bay is allowed to run, doesn't have to play every single day. I like him because he's got all the eligibility that you could ask for, especially even in NFBC, but definitely in a Yahoo step. And he's kind of close to getting outfield eligibility in a couple places as well. But Simpson, it seems like he has a more of a chance to stick in as close to an everyday role that the Rays would be willing to give somebody. Right, especially with between handedness and on base percentage and batting average in general. So a lot
I think
to
he
like
fits in
there.
perfect. If we look at this last week, like Tampa's faced 3 lefties and 3 righties. Their past 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron Meisner is only playing versus righties, right, in the outfield. I think that is where we see Chandler Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
I think Chandler Simpson is going to get in there, versus righties, because there is still room. Cameron Meisner sits versus lefties. Caballero is going to now move back to second base, in my opinion, because Brandon Lau is not playing versus lefties.
Yep.
So Curtis Mead plays versus lefties. I think Aranda is going to lose time versus lefties. That's going to be that's going to hurt a lot of people if it does indeed happen, and I'm upsetting people if it doesn't. So I apologize.
Just is
but
that
I
your fault?
think
You didn't do
there's
it.
room here for Chandler Simpson to keep this spot with what Tampa has going on. That's kind of my point here.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, a lot to look at, a lot to consider, and we'll see. As I'm showing here on the lineup, Tampa did face a lefty on calling him up, so it's not surprising he didn't get in there to on his first day. But you would expect that he'll get in there. And honestly, I'll be curious to see where he hits in the lineup when he does when he gets in his first game. With that on base percentage, with that, do you start him off toward the top of the lineup, or you just let him in the quote second leadoff spot and he just is at the bottom of the lineup? You kind of hope
I don't think they're
that's not
going to
the
hit
case.
anybody below Taylor Walls. So the question would be, is he in front of or behind the catcher, which they have been platooning fairly strictly. So
Hmm.
I see him in the 7 or 8 spot.
All right. Well, another call up here and this time for the Los Angeles Dodgers. They call up Noah Davis, who they got in a trade recently, actually from the Red Sox. So curious to know what you think Noah Davis's role is going to be, or is, for the Dodgers, and is it just continuously rotating in that extra spot as they bring in Landon Knack? He gets 2 starts. They send him down. Bobby Miller comes up. They send Bobby Miller down. Now Noah Davis is up. Is this a spot start type of situation? Is this a bullpen situation? What are your expectations for Davis with the Dodgers?
I think it's, a little bit of both. Bullpen, spot start, see what he can do. Now, if he takes off and outperforms the other guys, and it wouldn't take much to outperform Bobby Miller from the other night,
Hmm.
so I could see him sticking around a little while if he performs, but I think this is the Dodgers plan for the entire season. We're going to continue to see this. So it's going to be matchup dependent, and we're really going to have to, even if we don't hear something official by the time Faab runs on Sunday evenings, we're going to have to feel really comfortable that we know what they're planning to do that week with these extra spots.
Yeah, it just seems like, I mean, Dodgeritis can totally be a thing, and it can continue to be a thing all season long,
And it's
wherever they
more of
have.
a thing so far this season, it
Yeah.
seems like.
All right, one last call up before we have to get into some of the bad news here, Kevin. The White Sox called up catcher prospect Edgar Cuero, and as we talked about him and a bunch of other, honestly, catcher prospects for the White Sox in the offseason, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you did not expect to see Cuero, sooner rather than later. But here we are again, heading into the weekend, the third weekend of April, and the White Sox have a new catching option. Is he the type of catcher that you expect if they're going to call him up? He's going to be the majority catcher for especially for this White Sox team.
Yes, majority, but maybe not by a lot. I think Matt Thaiss is going to continue to get a couple of starts a week. So, but yeah, Edgar Cuero, definitely worth an ad if you need a catcher. We've seen some catchers that were drafted off the really slow starts, plus the couple of injuries. So, and we were talking off air, limited at bats, but what Carson Kelly's doing right now, what you
Yep.
get from your extra at bats from the catcher
Yep.
position, maybe he's somebody. But it is nice to see that we have some catchers available for Faab this weekend with Cuero, and I'm throwing Carson Kelly out there as well, being in Chicago on the other side of town. I think Cuero gets, the 60-40 split that we
Sure.
see with many teams. I think Thaiss is still going to get his at bats there, but on the short side.
Yeah, I definitely used my term majority on purpose and not
Literally.
no adjectives were used before the word majority. All right, well, that's some names to look at as far as call-ups go. We have a lot of players that are returning from injuries, and yes, we do have some players that are trying to return from injuries that might have hit some kind of setbacks, and we're going to get to those guys right after this break. Well, you might as well take this question, Kevin, that Frank threw out in the chat, since you're talking about Carson Kelly out there, and we'll get into the news in a second. But you might as well get into Question is, Carson Kelly, as well as he's been doing, is he worth adding at the expense of Danny Jansen, who's getting the at-bats, but obviously not doing the flashy fireworks that we've been seeing Carson Kelly do?
You know what? Danny Jansen isn't getting that many more at bats, so I think I'd hold tight with the hot hand. I'd be ready to jump ship. Carson Kelly's not going to have a 1600 OPS all season
No?
long, but right now, now isn't when I want to get him out of my lineup. Jansen has sat versus the last two righties. Now they knew they had lefties coming up the following day both times, so that might have played into that. I think Jansen is not a strict platoon guy for Tampa, but with them knowing they had lefties coming up, they let him sit versus the last two righties. So not really getting that many more at bats than Carson Kelly anyway. I'd ride Kelly because how many more runs? That's what you're missing
Right.
out on in at bats. But how many more runs and RBI are you going to get by another game or two a week from a catcher?
Yeah. I mean, this is a classic position that if you're in a position where you're already rostering Carson Kelly, great. Take it to the bank. But you're probably in a position where you can stream that position. And you ride the hot hand until somebody else hotter comes along. So good question there. Let's get into some of those injuries that were already injuries, and now they just seem like they got a little bit worse. First and foremost, Grayson Rodriguez, he's trying to come back as he recovers from elbow tricep injury, trying to avoid any kind of major surgery there. Unfortunately, he had to cancel his bullpen due to a shoulder injury and expecting to get some results from an MRI there. Completely separate part of his body, I guess, but not really. Still his arm. Obviously, want to avoid any injuries there, especially in his position. Safe drop across the board if you haven't already, Kevin.
I think so. I had already in the couple of spots I had him. And yeah, unfortunately, this is one I wish I wasn't right about.
Right. Well, yeah, especially in your honestly, all right. Are you more, you've dropped them already, sure. But
Mhm.
if you were on the fence, are you more apt to drop them in a 15 teamer or a 12 teamer?
Oh, I 100% am dropping him in a 12. In a 15, even though the bench spots become tighter, there's also less in the player pool. But he's still a drop for me. But if maybe if I don't need to do things this weekend, I might try to hold on for that news we're waiting on.
Yeah, I asked the question because, with these injuries or whatnot, because the player pool is so much thinner, do you feel confident enough to like hold them in a 15 than a 12 or vice versa based on, what your situation is on your team? I worry about, even if he does come back at some point this year, at what percentage will it be, and how productive will he actually be with now like basically three parts of his arm in question. The other one here that I saw that I don't have a lot to go on, I just kind of saw the headline here. I thought it was worth bringing up, especially since we're talking about catchers so much. Francisco Alvarez of the Mets, he's trying to come back from his injury. He was doing some rehab games, and in one of his rehab games, he did really well. But unfortunately, he was hit on the hand during that game as well. Do you do you know anything more than I do on this, and how worried are you about how much longer Alvarez might be out due to this new injury?
No, I don't, because the last player burb is we could see him next week
Yeah.
activated, right? And now this happens. So definitely waiting on more news here. I think he was a popular ad last week. People getting ahead of this, knowing he was getting close. So yeah, unfortunately for those that got him, probably less expensive than they could have this weekend. Now maybe that's not the case, and maybe you're dropping him right away anyway. Hopefully we get more news before Sunday night here.
Yeah, so if you were one of those that grabbed him last week and didn't see anything about this, make sure you're checking the news wire for any updates on him before Sunday, so you can either put him back into the pool or, count your lucky stars. We'll see how that turns out. we'll talk about it next week. But we've got some returnees, both from injury and then just coming back into the majors for one reason or another. First, the one coming back from injury, Zach Neto returns from the IL, and Nicky Lopez, makes room for him by being DFA'd. I mean, there was a lot of smoke kind of bubbling up leading up to here. Where it's like, oh, we're not sure when we're going to see Zach come back. We don't know what role he's going to have, even if he does come back. And then lo and behold, like 2 days later, he's back. Where do you expect him? You expect it to be all right, he's back, he's in the lineup every single day, or is it a slow burn for Neto?
Maybe slightly slow. Might get an extra day or two off just to start, but right out of the gate, RBI double, first at bat of the season. He's ready to roll. Curious that he's in the 7 hole. I don't think it will take him long to move up in the lineup, and he's not available anywhere. But
Sure.
yeah, and if you stashed him, you're starting him this next week. Hopefully, you got him in the lineup this weekend. But yeah, the only thing to watch is how quickly he moves back near the top of the lineup.
Yeah, and then as far as the Angels lineup goes in general, you think it's just a 1-for-1 swap with Neto and Lopez, or is somebody else losing out on time with Neto's return?
I don't see a whole lot else that will happen here. Tim Anderson, if anybody was using him in daily leagues because he wasn't playing every day, even against righties, but he was pretty much only playing versus righties, but did sit versus 2 over the past week. We might not see Tim Anderson much longer as a member of the Angels.
Yeah, of course, the other Kevin Newman taking up the majority of the spots at shortstop, in addition to Tim Anderson, I would assume loses some of that any value he might have had
Yeah.
before that as well. All right. Well, other returnees to the majors, not because of injury, just because it was their time. We talked about this signing late in spring training. Atlanta calling up Alex Verdugo at the behest of Brian De La Cruz, going down to being optioned as well. So not because of an injury, just De La Cruz not performing, Verdugo basically being ready from his quote extended spring training. What kind of role are you expecting out of Verdugo? Pretty much taking up the same space that De La Cruz was, or maybe he's destined for more time?
Well, hopefully he performs well enough to get more time. Versus a righty on Friday, both he and Jared Kelnick in the lineup, and I don't think Kelnick is going to be on this roster much longer, especially if we see Ronald Acuna Jr. back before June, as we were hoping, maybe even mid-May. So, but Verdugo could stick here, especially versus righties. And just like on Friday, first game up, he is in the leadoff spot versus righties. That's the key. Strong side platoon player that leads off when he's in that strong side platoon, he can get nearly as many plate appearances as a bottom third hitter that plays every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Always interesting to see a team basically platoon their leadoff spot, where somebody, one day against the lefty, they're, batting 6th or 7th, and then against the righty, they're leading off, or vice versa. And then sometimes you get somebody who just bats leadoff when they bat, and then when they're off against the platoon. So something to look out. I'm very curious to see how I agree. I am curious to see how this roster, especially the outfield in Atlanta, ends up ironing itself out once Acuna does make his way back at a full-time capacity. You've been banging the drum of Kelenic not being not being a factor at all once that happens for many, many months now, and it's getting closer and closer, and it's looking a lot more likely.
Right. And with Ozuna back, we weren't sure, early in the week how bad his injury was, but he's back in the lineup here on Friday as we're recording. So that takes that spot away. And when Acuna comes back, we saw this before, he actually did DH quite a bit when he first came back. So we might see Ozuna out there in left field a time or two before this is said and done. That would cut into this as well.
That brings up, I mean, it would be interesting to see Ozuna gain outfield eligibility once again. I think it might take quite a while for that to happen, if it does at all. But I found out this year in the offseason, like Ozuna, Rooker, Schwarber, all these DH only, they're all outfield eligible in Yahoo, even though a lot of them haven't touched the outfield grass in like 2.5 years. And I actually messaged out Yahoo, and they told me, like, no, we made a conscious decision that there's too many leagues that play without a UT spot, that these very good players would be not in the player pool if the position wasn't available. So we just let them have whatever their last position was the last time they had a position. I'm like, it's both. I understand, but
I understand that response, but I haven't seen one of those leagues ever.
Yeah. Their default league has 2 UT spots, right? The default Yahoo roster has 2 utility spots. So yes, I don't know about that. Anyway, it's interesting because, the logic is like, that's their position. That's the only position that should just be a position on your roster. The UT,
I think
the DH.
Okay, I'm going to go on a tangent here, because I think you have to qualify at DH. I don't think it should be a UT.
I agree.
I think it should be a DH, and you should have to qualify at DH in order to be in that spot. And I was thinking about this the other day.
That's what happens in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I've completely laughed about my first fantasy baseball league. It was already in existence. I joined it in 2001. So this is my 25th season playing fantasy baseball. But we did not separate the outfielders. It was outfield, but we only had 3. We did not have a middle, did not have a corner. We had 1 utility. We started 9 hitters, right?
Yes.
Because that's what a baseball team starts.
Yes.
Now that seems absolutely ridiculous, right? But what fantasy baseball has become, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Weren't we more like replicating being a baseball GM back then than we are now, when all we're looking at is matchups and plate appearances? And right back then, we were set, because here was the kicker, and this will sound just crazy to a lot of people. Trades were unlimited, but you were limited to 10 transactions per year that involved the waiver wire. If that was the case now, right, you have to go to a much smaller roster like that.
Right.
we wouldn't have players. But I was like, I used to make fun of that league once I started playing Roto, and I absolutely love Roto, and I love the 23 active roster. Absolutely love it. But as much as I used to make fun of that, that was probably more like being an actual baseball GM than what we're doing now.
And how many teams was it?
Yeah, you have to qualify at DH to be able to be played the DH spot.
How many teams were in that league?
12.
See, now that's the rub, right? Obviously, there are a lot, more than double those amount of teams in Major League Baseball. So, right, in order to be, if this was a 30-team league, that roster makes actually a whole lot of sense. And it can be a lot of fun. My first league was the same exact roster setup, 9 players, and we ended up growing in that. Now that league has an infielder spot and a 4th outfielder, and a couple of extra pitcher spots, a couple extra bench spots.
Do you do 9 pitchers though?
No, we don't do 9 pitch. We just changed it this year to 1 starting pitcher spot, 1 relief pitcher spot, and then 5 or 6 pitcher spots. So it's close. It's close to that many pitcher spots, but there still is.
Ours was 6 pitchers, at least 1, but not more than 2 had to be a reliever. That's That's what ours was.
Yeah.
And that was the entire reason for the 10 transaction rule, so you could not stream pitching.
Yeah, we do 4 a week. You can only pick up 4 players a week to stop, well, at least to mitigate streaming, because it is a daily moves league as well. So
Mhm.
streaming is definitely a thing. No matter how somebody who wants to stream is going to find a way to stream, no matter what your rules are. All right, we got 2 more in there. That was a wonderful tangent, by the way, Kevin. By all
Oh, thank you.
means, tangent away. I'm going to jump to the bottom one because this is a call up because it was due to an option. We'll start with the option. Matt Shaw for the Cubs was optioned this week, but in his stead, Vidal Brujan calls back up. But Brujan made the trip to Tokyo and then was sent back down when they came back to the States. Now he's back up in Chicago, presumably just taking the role that Matt Shaw left behind. Do you find that to be the accurate explanation of what he's doing here in Chicago, and can he be of any use to us?
I think he has to take it, and he very well could, and I hope he does. But we've seen since this move, we've seen 3 different players start at third base in the past 3 games for Chicago, and it was Gage Workman on Tuesday, John Birdie, who we know he can move around, and we'll see him at different spots. But Brujan is in the lineup on Friday, and I think the Cubs, like many fantasy players, are hoping that he can take this role and run with it.
And I mean, that's where Brujan had a lot of value in the past, is running with it. And so he has
Mhm.
that speed. Not, as you look at last year's stats up here on the board, you only had the 5 stolen bases last year. But that's also just through, 278 plate appearances. He has a history of being able to run. It's just whether or not he gets enough playing time for that to be valuable. He is not somebody, you stash for the speed if he's not playing, like we talked about with Simpson and others. But if he's going to add any extra value while he is playing, that could be one of the pieces. All right, and the last one here, Noelvi Marte, who obviously was suspended for the 80 some odd games last year for PEDs, and then did not have that great of a spring training and didn't even make the team for the Cincinnati Reds. He did get the call back up to Cincinnati in lieu of losing Christian Encarnacion Strand, who was put on the IL himself with lower back inflammation. So this was one of those where we do get somebody called back up, but it is due to an actual injury. Let's start with the injury so we can end on something less negative. How much are you missing Strand? And is this, I guess, going right into Marte, is this a 1-for-1 swap as far as what you expect out of playing time?
I don't think so. Sounds like we're gonna see a lot of Spencer Steer at first base if we believe the manager.
Sure.
At
Yep.
right? He said, "We'll see a lot of Spencer Steer at first base." That could completely change everything. We could see that, Espinal can play all over the field, usually versus lefties. Uh, they have moving parts here. It's always curious to see how these guys that Noelvi Marte was on a great trajectory until that suspension,
Sure.
and then we don't know, like,
How much
how
do
it's
you blame on?
affected
Yes.
him coming off of it,
Yep.
right? So, um, many times after it looking like, "Oh, this guy can't play," when he's not on the juice, it would be a common phrase we'd hear out there. They work their way back in, and hopefully Marte gets to that point, but I don't think we're gonna see him in a full-time role at least to start here, especially since we've already heard Steer going to first. He's been the designated hitter the last 4 games he's played in, so it could be absolutely anybody getting into the lineup if he's gonna be at first base.
Yeah.
Of course, that's Candelario moving back over to third is
Mm.
what allows this to happen. But, yeah, there's all kinds of shuffling that could go on here. This is something we have to monitor over the weekend. Marte is in there on Friday, but it's versus a lefty, and I'm afraid that might be the only nights we see him.
Yeah, I mean, as I have the lineup tracker here up on the screen, you can see that Marte did have a little stint last week or over the weekend before getting sent back down and then getting called back up, and did play against. He did start against a lefty and a righty and back to back, and then
Yep.
as you mentioned, back against the lefty today at third base each and every time. That first call up really came at the expense of, I guess, Will Benson. They didn't weren't like a 1-for-1 trade off, but I don't remember seeing what the reason he got called up last week was for, and I don't
Yeah,
see an
they
obvious.
were moving people around when
Hmm.
McLean and Hayes were both still out, and that's something I want to bring up because I did not put Hayes on a list later. He's 100% rostered in main events, but only 70% rostered in 12-team online championships. Hayes is a definite add in the 12-team and shallower leagues where he's available, hitting in the cleanup spot there most days.
Sure, and that was the reason why Marte got sent down, and obviously we know why he came back up. I just don't know why he got called up to begin with. Trying to figure.
Right.
So I don't know why he was up first. I know why he's up now. But yeah, Hayes, great call out there, especially in your shallower formats where he might not have been rostered due to being on the IL for so long. And yeah, Kevin, that'll do it. I think plenty of other news that we could have talked about. I think we only hit on one thing that really doesn't really affect anybody, and that's Neto, because he is rostered pretty much everywhere anyway. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff you might be interested in. Of course, you should be listening to the First Pitch podcast to get all of your daily information and the Plus Pitch podcast for all your pitching news on a daily basis right here on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. But we're going to get into our actual recommendations for your Faab on April 20th. We're going to do that right after this break. All right. Thanks for joining us once again on your Sunday. If you're watching at home on Friday, thank you so much for joining us once again. I'm going to echo something that Nick Pollock mentions pretty much on every single one of his Plus Pitch podcasts. Shoot, if you have 5 seconds, go into iTunes or Apple Podcast now, Spotify, go find the review button, shoot us a 5-star review. Any words you want to throw in there is just a bonus, a cherry on the cake. It goes a long way just to get not so much like exposure, just it gets us more exposure with the algorithms and all that, and it helps support us in the Pitcher List Podcast Network as a whole, the better than you could possibly imagine. Yeah, there's you're listening to some ads and here whatnot. We just came back from a break. I get that. But really what does the most support is just throwing a 5-star review out there. You know what? I'll take a 4-star review, but I prefer the 5-star, just going to say. And hopefully, we've been doing this long enough that, those are stuck with us for the last 4.5, 5 years. You're still with us and we're doing something that is useful to you. Let's make it useful to more and more people. Get the word out there. Appreciate it. And I mean, Kevin, you listen to plenty of podcasts. I know I listen to my fair share as well. I know you've gone out there and thrown your reviews on all the other podcasts that you listen to. So hey, I'm happy to share the
Actually, a
wealth
great
anywhere
point.
we can.
You know, once a year or so, I like to go make sure that I have,
Mhm.
and so that's a great point, and I will do that this weekend, and hopefully some others do as well.
There we go. Appreciate it. All right, well, let's get into the recommendations here, Kevin. Of course, we start with our power categories, our home runs, our RBIs, and we got our speed next. Who last week we kind of lamented at not having any options, but nice to see that we've got some options there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Powers first. Where can we get some home runs for this following week?
Yeah, shout out to you on my first guy. I think it was when we were talking about our Raslam and Cutline Fab week that you brought up Matt Mervis. He's still got a little bit of availability in 15-team main events. He's 90% rostered, but he's widely available in 12s. 24% rostered in the online championship. Started off pretty slow, couple of hits in the first 5 games, but since then he's had 6 home runs over the last 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that comes with a 40% strikeout rate. But if he can just get that strikeout rate, bring that, well, first of all, if he continues to hit 6 home runs every 9 games, I don't care what his strikeout rate is.
Sure.
But we're going to need to see that come down, and most projections have him actually getting under 30%, in that 28-29% range. If we see that from Matt Mervis, and he continues to make good contact, then yeah, sure, not 6 home runs every 9 games, but I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't think with full-time at bats that Matt Mervis isn't a 30 home run guy. Um, Dylan Moore, I think we've brought up every week for the past couple of months. And now typically we like him versus lefties, and we like his speed, and we know he has moderate power, but he's actually showing off his power this season, playing nearly every day, playing versus righties, actually hitting versus righties. So Dylan Moore, 95% rostered in 15 teamers, 65% in 12s, but those are going to change this weekend. I think he's playing well enough and often enough that we're going to see him universally rostered. One guy that's got a little more availability, he's only got 1 home run on the year, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well, and that's Griffin Conine. He's at 49% rostered in 15s. I was really trying to find a guy less than 90% for the 15-team leagues. But I had Griffin Conine in a couple of my lineups this week, and I'm happy with what he's doing.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with the Mervis production, as unfortunately, so I picked up Mervis like a couple weeks ago. With preparation of him getting that 1B eligibility, it took him longer to get the first base eligibility than I hoped. And so I had him in at least one league with alongside Brent Rooker. So he literally sat on my bench. So I don't think I got most of those 6 home runs, unfortunately. So he's got the first base eligibility now, though. So he's an option moving forward. Dylan Moore, just as worth pointing out, granted, playing almost every day, but he's also leading off against lefties. That doesn't hurt. I mean, obviously that's, once in a blue moon, they face one, but it's just nice to see. He's one of those guys who it's like, if he's batting against a righty, he's in the bottom third of the order, but all of a sudden he bats against a lefty, he's going to be leading off, or at least that's what they've been showing.
That's been a great evolution for Dylan Moore over the past few seasons. We used to only see him in the lineup versus lefties.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see him in the lineup versus righties once in a while, but we don't want him in our lineup
Right.
if he's facing righties. And now it's, yeah, Dylan Moore's playing almost every day, but leading off versus lefties, dropping down versus righties. Bring it on. Give us all the plate appearances we can get.
Yeah. And he's eligible pretty much everywhere.
Everywhere except first base.
Yeah. There's plenty of other people that are available at first base, like Matt Mervis. All right.
Quick, Frank's asking about a Faab bid for Mervis. That we don't talk dollar amounts or even percentages of Faab very often, and that's because every league is different. But Mervis isn't somebody I'm breaking my bank for. He's somebody I would put at the top of a waterfall, $20 to $30 range in 15 or in $1,000 Faab leagues. That may or may not be enough, but that's where I'd be comfortable either way, whether I get him or not.
Yeah, and with those dollar amounts, it matters so much about what your roster, not even what like your league is doing, but what your roster is.
How
like.
bad do you actually
If
need him?
I
Do you
need
have to have him?
exactly,
Yeah.
not even I have to have him, I have to have somebody. He might be at the top of that waterfall bid, but it's to fill a roster spot that I am desperate in. Like, oh crap, on Saturday 4 guys hit the IL. I don't have a middle infielder, or sorry, in this case, a corner infielder. I mean, I have to get somebody, and he might be the best one, and I can't do it to chance. I'm going to have to bid up a little bit in order to make sure that roster spot gets filled. Yeah, you can fill that waterfall bill with 10 or 15 guys. You'll get somebody, but that waterfall is going to start trickling very, very early on, I think, in most cases. All right, we'll move on to. Oh, I'm sorry, Frank. So I have Andrew Vaughn in many places as well, and it is not
So
going the
do
way
I.
I was hoping.
And I tried to get him out of my lineup everywhere. There was a couple of spots where I
Yeah,
couldn't.
you can't. Yeah, sure. All right, well, let's move away from power then and into speed. We already talked about some of these guys already, but what are your thoughts on who? I guess get into maybe we'll even get more specific about what kind of bids are you expecting to see out of these speedsters?
I expect triple digit bids on Chandler Simpson where he's available. I mean, and with the only risk being he could only be at the major league level for the weekend and sit back down.
Yeah.
That's the only risk because as we talked many times throughout the season, which it's not what we like because you're not getting any other counting stats this time of year. We're still mid-April. And so I really don't want someone in my lineup just for stolen bases, and I don't care if they're even in the starting lineup. I don't want to go to that route yet. But Chandler Simpson will get you stolen bases as long as he's on the roster. So I do expect triple digit bids there. I'm probably not going there, but I'll go higher than I typically do, hoping that he slips through a little. He's not going to slip through for $15 or $20 in $1,000 league, but he might slip through for 70 or 80. And that's probably where I'm going to be. I expect if you really want him, you probably got to go 150 plus,
Hmm.
especially in the 15 teamers where, as I said, 74% of teams draft of leagues had someone draft him and hold him this long. So he's going to be very popular, but available in 85% of the 12s. Caleb Durbin, I feel like everybody, or at least in general, obviously 30 stolen bases a year isn't 90 plus stolen bases a year over the past few seasons, like Chandler Simpson had it in the minors. Caleb
Mhm.
Durbin, though, 4 straight seasons where he runs and we know he'll run. I liked him when I saw him out in Arizona. I don't think he's just a speed guy, but he will absolutely be at the bottom of the lineup. Good lineup there in Milwaukee. Not they got off to a slow start, but they've been I think they've won every series since that opening weekend where they got swept. So Caleb Durbin will be a hot commodity on Sunday evening as well, but I don't think it will be the amounts we're seeing on Chandler Simpson. Um, but I'd be in the same spot because maybe slightly lower. And then I'll have a much better chance of getting him because I think that, 60, 80, $90 in $1,000 fab leagues, I think that'll be enough for Caleb Durbin. Of course, being available in 65% of main events, those 15 team leagues, we'll see triple digit bids there as well. But
So
yeah,
how about
it's that thing. It's back to what you just brought up, right? Like, I don't have to have him to win my league. I'd really like to have these guys,
right?
but I don't absolutely have to have.
I think that the bid amounts on Simpson will be completely correlated to how many stolen bases he gets on Saturday and Sunday. I'll
Yes,
say,
there you go.
at $50 per stolen base. I think that's about right. So yeah, so look for him. He did not get into today's game, by the way, on Friday at all. That game has concluded. He was not pinch run. He did not pinch hit as well. So we'll see where he sits in the lineup Saturday and Sunday and what he can do with it.
And
All right, we've
other
got.
than that, I'm sorry, Adam, but I just want to reiterate something from last week because we talked about anybody that has been stealing bases so far this season, their rostership is way higher than I expected.
Mhm.
There's some pretty, how can I say this nicely? There's some not
Very
spectacular baseball players, very highly rostered if they can steal bases,
right.
right? Those types of guys are highly rostered. So there's not a lot out there. So the guys that are a handful of stolen base guys in a 7-game week. That's who I'm looking at and hoping this is the week.
I mean, this is what we say all the time. Stolen bases is typically actually easier, it's easier to stream than home runs, right? It's like you can
Oh,
play
absolutely.
matchups. You know what somebody does well, and that's what they do. It's like a punter or a kicker. It's like you have one job. Simpson obviously has his one job. So he can have value. And even as at a triple digit bid, this is somebody who can live on your bench and you throw in for those 7 game weeks. He doesn't need 7 games to, give you the value that he wants, but maybe you also are okay stashing him when he does get, if and when he does get sent back down as well, because when he does come back up, he can make up for all that lost time in a single week, in theory. We'll see what it
Uncle
looks like
Ted
in
brings
practice.
up Kiersey Jr. in Minnesota. I looked at him. I'm worried about the playing time, and like I said, it's a little early in the season for me to be playing guys that are going to get their stolen bases by pinch running late in
Mhm.
games, uh, unless it's a guy that steals 100 a season like Sanderson.
Then you can roll
But
with that.
yeah, Kiersey, if he's going to get the playing time, that's a great pull there by Uncle Ted.
All right. Well, let's see who might get a little bit more playing time through some opportunities heading into next week. There are just less than a handful of teams that have 7 games ahead of them, including my Red Sox, the White Sox, Milwaukee, and San Francisco, all getting 7 games. All but 2 other teams get 6. The 2 that only have 5 include the Chicago Cubs and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So if you got some players on there, that aren't named, Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts or Kyle Tucker, maybe consider throwing them on your bench if you can handle that for the first half of the week. Colorado is away for 3 against Kansas City. So you got Rocky Road against your Royals. And then they'll be at home against Cincinnati. So Cincinnati can't lose here as they are on the road all week, but at least 3 of their games on the road are in Colorado. So nobody gets to enjoy Great American Small Park as the Reds will start the week with 3 in Miami, of all places. Tampa Bay is on the road all week coming up. So nobody, again, taking advantage of Steinbrenner Field. And then the Athletics, on the other hand, are at home all week with 3 versus Texas and 3 versus the White Sox. So we'll see how well the Rangers and the White Sox can take advantage of that ballpark. With all that in mind, anything else you want to consider, Kevin? Who looks like they might be getting a little bit more of an opportunity than we might have thought from last week?
Yeah, I'm going back to Minnesota. They did face righties all week. I want to check really quick what the upcoming week looks like. It appears they'll see Martin Perez as a lefty, and then Kikuchi over the weekend. So 4 righties, 2 lefties. That's at least 4 starts in the leadoff spot for Edward Julien. And this has been a guy that has been very frustrating for me because I've been in, right? Every time he is brought up and starts getting some playing time, I buy in. Last season, that did pay off a couple times. Typically, it was more with stolen bases when I was really looking at him for more power, but he surprised us with a few stolen bases last season. But if he is going to lead off most days and continue to hit 250, then we're going to see some good numbers for Julien once Minnesota's lineup comes
Mhm.
around. That's a kicker as well, which they kind of have the last couple of days, and they're continue to shuffle things around. I'm sure that's part of why they're making all these moves, not just the injuries. It's like we got to shake this up. So I really like Edwards Julien. He's available in 40% of 15s and almost all 12s out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just stay in Minnesota just because we're on this page, but I think we might have forgotten to mention that Brooks Lee came back from the IL and is pretty much taken over third base, with Jose Miranda being demoted over the last weekend as well.
Oh, he
So,
was injured. Miranda got hurt.
oh, right. I guess
Yeah.
technically they didn't put him on the IL. They just threw him down in the minors. It's kind of tricky.
Oh,
It's
wait,
kind of
was it
mean.
Miranda they sent down and then he got hurt the first day or something?
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
like.
think
I
that
actually
was
think he
Miranda.
got hurt while in the minors. That's just bad luck.
Yeah, the first day. That's right. That's what happened.
Yeah, Brooksley
Yeah,
just
but
somebody if
yeah,
you need.
Lee and Keyshaw and Jonah Bride might get a little bit of run. I think this Minnesota lineup is fascinating because it's been much more stable than they want it to be.
Wanted to
They
be, yes.
want to be able to shuffle these guys around.
Mhm.
So I think Julian gets these at bats at least versus righties.
Yeah, and to your point, they haven't faced a lefty since the eighth. So they've had like 10
Yeah.
straight righties to face off against. So not a lot of opportunities to do a natural platoon if you don't actually have platoons to activate.
Exactly.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've got lots, more than a handful of hitters to consider, whether it's because of their call ups or their injuries or what have you, or just opportunities to head themselves. And then we got a lot of pitchers to think about, and we're going to think about all of them after this break. All right, Kevin. Hope you take a deep breath, and we'll get into our volume categories here for the pitchers. Wins and strikeouts. Of course, we're thinking guys that have a two-start, projected two-start week ahead of themselves, guys who can vulture a win here or there. Maybe they just have a single solid matchup that they can take advantage of and are actually available. You got a lot of names on here. And you know what? As I'm looking at these percentages, a lot of them are available, especially in your 12 teamers. So, what do you think? Tell me everything you know about all these guys you want to recommend.
No, so first of all, the great thing is some of the guys with the most availability are actually the guys I like the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's awesome. And starting off with Brandon Young, we will see him Saturday, so that will make him available to us. And I'm also going to talk about several other Baltimore starters. Every single starter in the Baltimore lineup has some availability in main event leagues. That is crazy to
Crazy.
me. We thought Baltimore was, a contender for the AL East and to
Sure.
win the AL and go to the World Series, and every single pitcher in their starting rotation has some availability in 15-team leagues. Now, a couple of them are 98% rostered, right? And the only one I don't have any interest in is the most well-known, Charlie Morton, right? Unfortunately, I wish I did. It's just unfortunate. You can't handle that whip these days that you're going to get from
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Morton, even when we're chasing wins. But I really like Brandon Young, and I think this could stick. He might. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that he could end up being the best pitcher in this rotation this season if everything goes well. He gets to at Detroit, which is a really nice lineup, but it's also a nice ballpark. So depending on what we see Saturday, that's going to affect the prices. Maybe not that much. I think he's going to be high price regardless. But I like Brandon Young. I said I like all of these Baltimore pitchers. Dean Kramer, 58% rostered in main events, universally available in 12s. He's at Washington, at Detroit. Again, two lineups that are much better than what we're used to, but not horrible ballparks. Washington being a little scarier than Detroit, but I like that. Sugano for Baltimore, 97% rostered, 15, 69% 12s. He's at Washington. And then Cade Povich, he's 86% and 29%. So these are guys we've talked about already this
Sure.
season, most of them. But any of the Baltimore guys, depending on who's available in your league, with Brandon Young being available in every single NFBC league, definitely like those. Brian Bayo for your Red Sox. coming back,
Mhm.
and only 32% rostered in 12s. And he gets Seattle at home and then at Cleveland, it appears. So 98% rostered in 15s, but worth checking. I also like Sean Newcomb a little bit this week. Some of these, it's like deep leagues. Sean Newcomb would probably be one of those, but getting Seattle, being a lefty, there's some leagues I could see running Sean Newcomb out there this week. Will Warren, not a lot of availability, but he's at Cleveland and he is available in 22% of 12s in FBC. Um, Carlos Carrasco. Now, this is not a move I would make in very many spots, but once again, in deep leagues, the 38-year-old is going out there, throwing the ball over the plate, letting his defense do the work, and he's available everywhere. He gets Toronto that hasn't really scared anybody. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. finally hit a home run, so maybe Toronto's lineup's going to come around, but I can see a spot for Carrasco. Some guys I'm actually more interested in, Zach Littell. The only problem is these matchups.
Are
Man,
not. Yeah.
for a two-step, he gets at Arizona and at San Diego, the first and fourth offensive lineups by OPS so far this season. So I'd probably Zach Littell is a guy I'm trying to grab now. He should be very inexpensive in the leagues he's available in this week because I don't think anybody wants to throw him out there for those matchups. So that's a spot for Littell. Martin Perez, we know
You
he
just
can go
ride
out
it.
there and just blow up,
Mhm.
but he's at Minnesota. Minnesota has a 393 OPS versus left-handed pitching.
Is
I
that
think it was
good?
123 at bats. A 393 OPS versus left-handed pitching so far this season. So I love Martin Perez this week. He's available in over half of 15s and 90% of 12s. Shane Smith is in that same spot. Davis Martin. Uh, all these White Sox pitchers, but they're available. And he gets at Minnesota, but also has to go at the Athletics. That scares me a little bit. I would prefer Martin Perez over Davis Martin. Davis Martin, probably a better pitcher, or at least has higher ceiling than Martin Perez. However, Martin Perez doesn't have to go to the Athletics. He just gets that Minnesota start. Luis Ortiz in Cleveland, he gets the Yankees. Don't want him for that, but if we're looking ahead, that would line up for a two-step next week versus Minnesota and at Toronto. So Luis L. Ortiz is somebody I'm looking at if I'm looking ahead, if I have an extra spot where I could only have to stash a guy for a week. Ben Lively and Logan Allen, they're both versus the Red Sox. Don't like those a whole lot, but there's quite a bit of availability there if you're in a tight spot. The Red Sox actually over the past several days, the lineup is kind of
Non-existent?
struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be nice.
I know. That's
and,
fine.
and I don't even need to. I busted out the George Brett Hall of Fame jersey to try to get the Royals going today.
Right.
That didn't even work.
No, it did
The
not.
Royals have scored over 4 runs one time this season. One. We're 3 weeks into the year. They've scored over 4 runs once. So I don't have much room to talk there.
Sure.
Speaking of the Royals, Michael Lorenzen gets Rocky Road, and he's got a lot of availability. David Festa. Now, Pablo Lopez could be back in time to take that start. Roster Resource has Festa still starting and Pablo Lopez starting the next day. I would kind of roll with that because we've talked about this for 2 or 3 weeks now. I don't think Chris Paddock, he might not make another start.
Sure.
Right. So they might let Festa keep this spot, bring Pablo back the next day in Chris Paddock's spot. But definitely keep an eye on that over the weekend. Griffin Canning still has a lot. Well, not a lot, over a third of 12-team leagues he's available and a few 15-team leagues. He gets Philadelphia, but, going into the season, I was scared of Philadelphia. I know Philadelphia can go out there and put up double-digit runs against anybody, but Griffin Canning's looked really good. so far this season. Kind of like what we thought we were going to see before he started suffering all those injuries a few years back. So I'd grab Griffin Canning, maybe not throw him out there versus Philadelphia, but definitely grab him. Andrew Abbott has a ton of availability in 12s, and he is at Miami. Quinn Priester and Jose Quintana in Milwaukee, both highly rostered in 15s, but a ton of availability in 12s at San Francisco, at St. Louis. Two teams that are performing much better than we thought they might offensively so far this season, but a couple of nice ballparks to pitch in, especially this time of year. And Tobias Myers as well. It looks like get his start next week at San Francisco, best ballpark in baseball to pitch in. So a lot of these guys, hopefully, there's only a couple of them that have a ton of availability in 15s, but a lot of them are available in, 25 to 35% of 15. So hopefully in your specific leagues, they're there. Most of these guys are available in a ton of 12s.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, it's worth mentioning to call out Uncle Ted making this comment and double checking, and absolutely right. Martin Perez did leave the game today after
Oh,
3
no.
innings with forearm tightness. So we missed that in the news. Probably want to go ahead and edit that recommendation out for you later.
Yep.
But yeah, probably not going to make. I'm going on a limb saying he probably won't get that start at Minnesota next week. So, and probably becomes a little bit more available after this Faab period rather
If you
than.
can figure out who's going to get that start at Minnesota, I like them.
There you go.
Yeah. That's how bad Minnesota's been.
Yeah. No, and like we mentioned, like they have not only have they been bad, but they've had no consistency with all the injuries that they've had to deal with. Like the most consistent player that they think they've had all season is Byron Buxton. And that's obviously saying something.
Yeah, and Bader, but he doesn't even play versus every righty
Right.
these days. They sat since versus 2 righties this week, so
And twin's gonna twin, I guess. That can be a thing. All right. Well, lots of volume to consider, especially with all these matchups. Like the good majority of the matchups that you listed off here are just so incredibly tempting. Between all those Minnesotas, I mean, this past week, I feel like you could pretty much stream against Pittsburgh anywhere, and with any pitcher because they were all available throughout the week. And now it seems as though we've got the White Sox versus Minnesota next week. So there's in Baltimore at Washington. So there's a lot of matchups where the majority of the rotation is available for you to pick and choose which one you want to go with.
yeah, I looked at Pittsburgh. I like picking on Pittsburgh. I looked at them. I think Jose Soriano was more highly rostered than that I thought he would be.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Anderson, they're going to get those starts, and then Pittsburgh's at the Dodgers. So unless we can figure out who's going to be that 5th starter in LA, the rest of them are rostered. So definitely tried to look there.
All right. Let's get into some ratio help then, Kevin. We got the volume out of the way. Who is going to get some innings to then get our ratios being chopped down just a little bit?
Yeah, I picked a couple of guys that have 7-game weeks. I'm realizing that the number of games you have in the upcoming week, I think, at least at this point in the season, matters more than the last 2 or 3 day usage.
Mm-hmm.
is what I've been noticing. So it's really about volume number of games, and unless you see a guy is used on both Saturday and Sunday, if he's used on Sunday, that's not steering me away. I'd use it as a tiebreaker, but these guys are highly rostered in 15s because there was some closer speculation. Abner Uribe for Milwaukee, but he's only rostered in 24% of 12s. I think we're kind of getting a little more comfortable with McGill as the closer there in Milwaukee. So I think we'll see more availability for Uribe over the next couple of weeks as people make more moves. But his ratios have been phenomenal. He's definitely a high leverage guy for them right now. So he's somebody that I love for this category. And then a guy we talked about as a closer speculation a couple of weeks ago, and that's Tony Santillan in Cincinnati. Looks like Pagan has taken over that job at least most days. I don't know if there's a guy for Cincinnati, but the ratios are great. We might get a save now and then, and with these guys coming in high leverage, late innings, sixth, seventh, eighth, there's always a chance to snag a win as well. And as I've been saying throughout this offseason and this season, Rick Graham's saves plus holds list. The guys not getting saves are available, and some of those guys are very high on his saves plus holds list, where they're actually better pitchers than the guys getting saves. These are the guys you want. Check out Rick Graham's weekly article on pitcherlist.com.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm scrolling through right now as you're talking about this. I'm just pulling up the article, scrolling it up. So you get a nice little preview, but go check it out yourself so you can look at it at your own pace rather than just watch me scroll. But yeah, a lot of obviously valuable pitchers on this list that can help you in a variety of ways. Jeremiah Estrada, obviously, rostered in a bunch of places, even though he's not even second man up. He's the third man in the totem pole in San Diego, but still on his top 15, just based on everything that he brings to the table on a regular, and he's pitching on a regular basis as well. We're getting into actual saves now. Obviously, we're talking about relievers. Some things I didn't mention in the news section that obviously is worth bringing up in this category is that Michael Clevinger was DFA'd by the White Sox. If there was an opportunity for him to actually close out games, that's not there anymore. So there is technically, I guess, an opening there. And then Bresky in Detroit, he hit the IL as well. That was already kind of a mess, but with Bresky not in the mix at all, that's, it fine tunes that situation more so. Not that either the Tigers or the White Sox are providing a whole lot of opportunity as of late, but do either one of these openings pique your interest for this weekend's Fab period?
Not really for the Fab period, unfortunately. I think Conley is going to be a little more the guy in Detroit. I think he's up to 4 saves now, and he's not getting every opportunity, but I think he'll get most of them. I do agree with Jason at Roster Resource that it'll be Jordan Leisure in Chicago, but when was the last save opportunity they had? So not a lot to go on there either. Things have cleared up. For the first 3 or 4 Fab periods, a lot of these things were unsettled. Even where they're still unsettled, all the guys are rostered.
Oh, yeah.
Emilio Pagan in Cincinnati, I think it's probably getting a majority of the opportunities now. Very highly rostered, but check. Conley in Detroit, we mentioned. Alvarado in Philadelphia, there was some questions. Seems like he's going to get more than the rest of the guys. So this is one of those situations where you have to go and search for every single name in every single league you're in just to make sure that they're not available, because that they're like, none of them are 100%. I don't think they're all 98, 99%, which means they've slipped through the cracks in a league or two. So you got to check.
Yeah, even like the AJ, like Arizona, Justin Martinez, AJ Puck, like you said, the ones where there's like 1 or 2 guys that are like even splitting, they're all rostered as well. Even though each one of them maybe gets 1 save a week, it's still a quote guaranteed save because they're on good teams and it's not a full on committee. It's just 1 or 2 guys. Philadelphia is a good call out there with Alvarado and obviously the other options that he has to compete with. But as you mentioned, it does seem like he's going to get the vast majority. Matt Strahm got a save the other day in Philadelphia. A lot of people like Kirkering, but Romano doesn't seem to be in the mix at all moving forward.
Right.
Cool. All right. Well, it's still my favorite category, so love to see. And I like that you don't fill in anybody on this, so I don't even know who you're going to talk about until we actually start talking about it. And maybe you don't either. Maybe you just come up with it as we come. I don't know. I don't care. Who might be your stash, your wild card speculative bid, if you have some flexibility to do so.
It's kind of a combination of all that,
Yeah.
Adam. Sometimes I'm really not sure. Sometimes I do know and don't write it down. Um, this time of year, this is tough. Unless you because typically we're talking NFBC. And last week, excuse me, I brought up a young prospect that you in NFBC formats nobody has rostered, and you can't go out and get him. But this time of year, uh, it could typically be somebody that do we think might come back from injury a little sooner than we thought? Or is it a prospect that was drafted and dropped? And I know I've brought this name up a lot throughout this offseason and in this category 2 or 3 weeks ago. I still think we see Jordan Lawler soon. And he's available in some leagues because he was drafted in some leagues, but then dropped by now. And so it's I know we saw Perdomo had the great night a couple of nights ago, and he got his contract. I don't think that's holding Lawler back. I think we're going to see Jordan Lawler sooner than later. And if he was drafted in your league and dropped, I think I'd stash him if I have room.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, what more does this guy have to do to not only get called up, but to just play? I mean, this was somebody you thought was drafted to be the future or part of the future of this team, and yeah, it gets a little confusing from an
Well, we're
outsider.
to that point that no matter what reason we were given, the extra year of control has been acquired.
Yes.
And we were told that when Perdomo signed his big contract, this didn't have anything to do with
Yes,
Jordan Lawler,
exactly.
what they thought about him. He would not hold him back. When Lawler's ready, we'll see him in the lineup every day. It would mean somebody else is going to lose a spot because I don't think Perdomo is going to
No,
the
you don't
bench.
pay the guy. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're going to see Lawler soon. I really do.
Well, here we go. I mean, like you said, he's available in a bunch of places where he was drafted and dropped. So always check your wire and see what you can find. And what's also good. And I started doing this. I didn't do this in like week 1, but I've been doing it ever since. Especially in NFBC, where you can copy your bids from league to league. Do your shallower leagues first. Build out all of your bids, even more bids than you probably need to do, and copy that one into your 15s. It'll tell you if the guy's not available. It's fine. You can whittle it down, but that's a good way to kind of find diamonds in the rough that you're like, oh, I can't believe that guy was available. I wouldn't have even looked for him because I would have assumed he was not available. But obviously, more of the availability is going to be in your 12s than it is in your 15s. So let the platform do the work for you in some capacity. Kevin closes out then with any other pieces of advice that anybody can take with them into the 5th Faab period of the season.
Well, this would typically be my first don't forget weekend of the season, but we mentioned that earlier. So if you have things going on this weekend, especially on Sunday, stuff with the kids in the morning, maybe a dinner later, or anything you may have going on, whether you're celebrating a holiday or not, don't forget about Faab this weekend. However, I want to piggyback off of what you just said as well, because it's if I was looking at my TARF league availability, and there's so many players that have availability in 15-team leagues, and they're not in TARF. And I'm off to a horrible start, especially on the hitting side. Yeah, Wilson Contreras, Mark Vientos, guys that are finally picking it up, but
Sure.
they've been in my lineup from the get-go. So I've been looking, and the great thing about a league where so many players you don't think would be rostered are, that means there has to be players that you assumed were rostered that aren't.
There you go.
That's where you gotta flip that around and go looking, just like you just said.
No, that's a great point. It's like, oh, I can't believe these guys are so smart. Everybody in my league is. I mean,
I
same thing
mean,
happens in
somebody's
Glarf.
available.
All the ARFs, like they're all so competitive.
Yeah.
But yeah, like why has that player been rostered for so long? But you're right. It does. It opens. I mean, that means somebody else is not rostered. Doesn't make him valuable all the time, but at least he's like, oh, I didn't have a chance to pick him up in some other league because he was drafted in those. That's a good call out. It's a good way of looking at it. If nothing else, it's a good mindset to have.
Somebody's available.
Yeah, something's. You might not like it, but there is something out there. All right. Well, with all that and everything else, that is going to wrap it up for episode 210 of On the Wire. Thanks for listening, everybody. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hastings. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.